You don't need to buy bread anymore. It's so easy to make at home, and this bread is going to taste way better than the bread you get in the store. You can see how really nice and soft and fluffy that turns out, and it stays like this for days. So here in a bowl, I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of water. And this water is just barely lukewarm. You should barely be able to feel it, or it should feel just slightly warmer. So now I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of sugar. And I'm just gonna mix that so that the sugar gets nice and dissolved. So just until it's nice and clear, that water. So now we're going to add 2¼ teaspoons of yeast. I always like to buy yeast in a jar like this, but sometimes I do use the packets. If you're using a packet, you're gonna need one of those packets. Okay, so I'm just gonna sprinkle that in there. 2 1/4. Now we'll just mix that together. So now we're gonna let this sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, and it's going to start to kind of bubble up. That's gonna tell us that the yeast is active, and if it doesn't do that, then it means your water was too hot and it's no longer alive, or it means that your yeast has expired. So, you know, you always want to check the little expiry date on here. Keeping it in the fridge preserves its life. If you're absolutely certain that your yeast is within the expiry date, then you should be pretty safe to skip this step. You don't have to wait 10 minutes. It is a pretty chilly day here today, so it's not foaming up quite as fast as it usually does when it's warm. This is what it looks like today here in Canada where I live. So you can see here that the yeast is moving, but because it is a chillier day here today, it's not quite as foamy as it usually is. I'm absolutely certain that this yeast is 100% fresh because the due date is August 2025. I do a lot of baking, so I go through yeast quite quickly. So from here, I'm just gonna stir that down a little bit, and now I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of milk. And I'm using whole milk, but it really doesn't matter. I'm also gonna add 2 tablespoons of oil. So here is number 2. And now I'm just gonna mix that. Okay, so the sugar, the milk, and the oil are 3 ingredients that are going to make this bread really soft and fluffy. All right, now here I have exactly 500 grams of flour. Okay, and I'm gonna start with about 2 cups. I wanna get a nice, I'm gonna make this into a really thick batter before we turn it into a dough. You wanna do this in stages. So just kind of add the flour in, turning into kind of like a pancake batter. Okay, so 500 grams is about 4 cups. But that really depends on what kind of flour you're using. So it was actually more than 4 cups of this flour in particular. So that's why it's always better to weigh your ingredients, because 4 cups of flour here might mean 5 cups of flour where you live. So if you go exactly by how many cups and not how many grams, then everyone's recipe is going to end up having different amounts of cups in it. So that's why if you can weigh your ingredients, you know, I know it's a little bit tedious sometimes. Not everyone likes to weigh things on a scale. It's easier to just scoop up cupfuls, but you're going to get much better consistent results if you go by weight. Baking is something that I try to always, you know, go by weights rather than just volumes. All right, so this is coming together into a nice kind of like a shaggy dough. And one thing we did not add yet is salt. So I'm gonna add the salt in now. And this is 1 1/4 teaspoons. So there's 1 1/4. Oh shoot. Oh no. Here, I'm just gonna get rid of some of that salt. Ooh, I had to compensate for what just happened there. A little bit too much went in, but it's gonna be fine. Okay, so now I'm going to start kneading this dough and all that salt in there. And we're just gonna keep doing this here until it kind of cleans the sides of the bowl. So you just kind of, you know, rub the dough all the way around like this. You can kind of use your fingers to rub the dough off the bowl and get it nice and clean. Just like this. And the dough should feel a little bit sticky, but I'm not going to add more flour to it because a sticky dough usually gives you a much better, softer bread. So I'm just gonna start kneading this. So the kneading just kind of goes like this. You just kind of pull the dough away from you and then you fold it back. You just kind of move it around like this to develop that gluten. It almost doesn't matter that much how the dough moves as long as it's in motion. As long as it's going through some kind of push and pull like this so that those gluten strands develop. So we have to knead this for about 10 minutes. Yeah, it's a lot. It has to be nice and smooth and elasticy. And one really good tool that I use for this is this bench scraper. And this is a really nice little 6-inch bench scraper. You know, you can use it for all kinds of tasks in the kitchen. I'll link it in the description where you can get one of these for yourself. But it makes kneading dough way easier, especially these sticky doughs. So this is what my dough looks like after 5 minutes of kneading. It's already getting a lot less sticky. It's becoming very smooth. It's super soft. It's still a little bit sticky, and it's not kneaded enough yet. I still have to knead it for about another 3 to 5 minutes, but I'm just going to keep going here until it's developed enough gluten. So here we are. After 10 minutes of kneading, this is how much better the dough looks. So it's very, very smooth, and it's still very soft, which is good, but it does have a little bit of stickiness to it still, but not nearly enough to be sticking to my hands. So there we have it. So now that the dough has been kneaded long enough, now I'm gonna take this same bowl, no need to wash it or anything, and I'm going to add some oil to it. Not much, maybe just a teaspoon or so. Now we're gonna take the dough and just use it to spread that oil around. Now flip it upside down again, like this. Okay, so now we're gonna cover it and let it rise for about 1.5 to 2 hours until it's doubled in size. So now you wanna get yourself a cloth, kitchen towel. On a day like today, it might be closer to the 2-hour end, but we'll see. I'm gonna go put this by the fire and we're gonna see what it looks like after about 2 hours. Another thing you can do is put this in your oven and turn the light on. That light will give off just enough heat to give it a warm environment, and then it will rise really well. And here's how it's gonna look after 2 hours. So you can see that it's very well doubled in size, and that's really good. However, before we get it into a pan, I'm gonna let it bench rest. So I'm gonna take it out of the bowl and I'm going to flip it kind of over like this so that the outer part is facing upward, and I'm going to just kind of work it into a tight little ball like this. So I'm just gonna flatten it out a bit, and I'm gonna cover it again and let it rest for another 20 minutes. That gives it a chance to rest again so that shaping it into the loaf is going to be way easier, and we're going to get a much nicer kind of form and appearance to the loaf. So you can skip this step if you want to and just go ahead and shape your loaf now, but I've found that it makes a real difference when you let it bench rest. So 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and shape it into a loaf. And after 20 minutes, this is what it looks like. So you can see that it's kind of proofed a little bit. It's been rising. So I'm going to take this now and shape it into a loaf. But first, I'm gonna get this pan ready. So this is a 9 by 5-inch loaf pan, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of oil. You wanna be fairly generous because a lot of this type of dough tends to stick. So we're just gonna get in all the corners and everything, and we'll just set that aside here. And I'm gonna show you a really great way to shape your loaf. I'm gonna move the board out of the way, And now I'm going to take that dough and flip it upside down. So we have this side here, the bottom side. I'm just going to make it into a nice big rectangle like this. Just form it fairly thin. This is probably about, I don't know, maybe 11 by 14 inches. Okay, so once you have a nice rectangle like this, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now you take the one side and fold it over 1/3, and then take the other side and fold it over the other third. And now we're going to kind of squish it down. And now grab the end that's away from you and roll it kind of tightly towards you, like this. There's so many ways to shape a loaf of bread. You have to do it the way that works for you, but this is what gives me the best results. And now we're going to take these two ends here because we have the roll on the two ends, and I'm just going to tuck them under like that. And now I'm going to move it this way and then just roll in a kind of a circular motion like this. And you want the top of the bread to be very tight, and you want to sort of maintain that loaf shape. Okay, so once you're pretty satisfied with this, you can just drop it right into your pan. And I like to kind of squish it down. And I always try to shape the loaf so that the two ends are not pointy. Don't worry if it doesn't look perfect at all. It is going to rise in the pan, so it will all kind of even itself out. So now I'm going to cover this again, and now we're going to let it proof for a little less time, maybe 45 minutes to 1 hour. I'm going to start preheating the oven in 30 minutes so that it will be ready to go. Okay, so here we are 45 minutes later, and this is what it looks like. So you can see that it's doubled in size. Even though this has been 45 minutes, a time frame is not the best measure to go by. The best way to tell whether your dough is proofed enough is if you press down slightly on the dough and if it springs back like that. You see how it kind of goes down and then comes back up? That means it's perfectly proofed. So now I'm going to put this into the preheated oven. It's preheating at 400 Fahrenheit, but now that it's in the oven, I'm going to reduce the temperature to 350 Fahrenheit. So there we have it, our beautiful bread. So this was in the oven for exactly 25 minutes. I actually kept the oven on for 20 minutes, and normally I turn it off and then let it sit in the oven off for another 5 minutes. So that's kind of a total of 25 minutes baking. And this is what it should sound like when you tap on it. It should almost have that hollow sound. So we're just going to let this sit in the pan for a little bit, maybe about 5 minutes or so. And then I'm going to take a knife and run it along the edges. Now I'm going to transfer this onto a wire rack. So I'm just going to tip it over and out it comes just like this. So there we have our beautiful loaf of bread. This step is totally optional, but you can take a little bit of butter and sort of smear it on the crust like this. Just so it gets that nice little shiny look. It also adds a little bit of flavor. This makes it look so good. I think it looks 10 times better like this. There we go. Now, tempting as it is, you don't want to cut into this while it's warm. You want it to cool completely. If you were to cut into this right now, it would release a lot of moisture. And when it cools completely, you end up with a really dry, almost gummy bread. So it's worth it to just wait. So here we are, it's about 2 hours later, and the bread is completely cooled. You can see how nice and soft it is. So we're going to cut into this beautiful bread. Oh wow, that looks so nice. And there we have it. Oh geez. You can see how really nice and soft that is. Wow. I'm going to cut another slice here. Get a better idea of how nice and soft that bread looks. Really good. Yummy. Oh, there we go. You can see how really nice and soft this is. And it stays like this for days. It's perfect for sandwiches. It makes really great toast. You have to give this bread a try. It tastes 10 times better than the store-bought bread. So go bake up a storm and have fun doing it.